After spending the best part of the holidays removing the old fence, I was finally ready to start putting the new posts and panels into place. But first, I needed some reference points. I used the council post to find the center of the boundary and planted a stick to which I attached a piece of string at the height that would roughly be the top of the new fence. I then did the same thing at the other end, pulling the string taut and using a level to make sure the string was at the same height at both ends, as I didn't know for sure if the ground was level. Now it's time to start digging. Unlike the compost bin project, this time I'm using a post hole digger to make it easier, checking the depth every now and then. These posts needed to be 2.5 feet in the ground, so I needed to dig at least that deep. The hole is also meant to be 12 inches square, which is larger than the digger, so I used the spade to square off the edges. Once the hole was deep enough, I realized that I needed another reference point, as the string only told me where the middle of the fence would be, and it would still be easy to twist the post out of alignment. So I drew another piece of string to mark where the edge of the fence post should be. It's time to prepare for pouring the concrete in. The fence manufacturer recommends the fence post to be sitting on at least 2 inches of ballast, which is a mix of gravel and sand, to allow for drainage. For the concrete, I'm using some quick setting pre-mixed concrete which you can pour directly into the hole with some water. I trucked all the materials for the first pour to the other side of the garden and started pouring the ballast in. I think I needed about 2/3 of a bag per hole. Because pouring the concrete is more or less irreversible, I had to calm my anxiety and fear of doing things wrong by dry fitting the first post, checking that it was roughly plumb and touching the string on the side. Now time for the concrete. For the hole this size, you need 2 bags of concrete. The instructions say rather counterintuitively that you pour the water in first to about 1/3 of the depth. I was terrible at eyeballing this, so I had to measure the depth and use visual cues every time, but even that didn't give me consistent results. If you have access to another person, having someone to hold the post in place while you pour the water might be a good idea, as the post might shift as the water moves the ballast base around. I later borrowed an outdoor umbrella stand from the neighbor to pack the ballast, which eliminated that problem. The instructions tell you to pour the concrete mixed into the watery hole until you see no standing water left, which is a bit difficult to see when the process is kicking up so much dust in your face. What the instructions don't tell you though is that you should wait about 30 seconds for the concrete to absorb the water before seeing if you need to add more concrete. It should look like grey sludge with no concrete powder visible. Before the concrete starts to set, make sure to check that the post is level and plumb, and also check that it stays parallel to the line. If the post is resting on a stable and level base, you shouldn't need to hold it in place while the concrete sets. The fence installation instructions recommend you should shape the top of the concrete so that it slopes away from the post to help with drainage. It was kind of hard to do, so I did as best as I could with a flat stick before the concrete set. After about 15 minutes, the concrete had set and I could start placing the first panel, starting with the gravel board. While these are slotted posts, it's easier to place the gravel board and panel as you go. These ones are heavy enough that they'll stay in place. You'll want to check that the board is on the line and at the right height. The top of the panel is meant to be flush with the top of the post, so I was a bit low here, but that was an easy fix. A good idea would have been to level the ground along the entire line before starting to dig and place panels, which would have sped up the whole process significantly, but I tend to have good ideas only after the work is finished. With all that done, I could backfill the hole and repeat for the second post, and so on. Because I didn't level the hole run first, I ended up having to constantly check that the gravel board was at the right height, using the previous one as a reference. To double check, I also measured the distance from the gravel board to the top of the post, which should be exactly 4 feet. Another challenge was to dig the holes in such a way that the post would be in the center and therefore evenly surrounded by the concrete. My method was to get the post in the right spot, stomp the ground with it to leave a mark, and trace my 12-inch square hole around it with the spade. After that, it's digging as usual, clearing out any obstacles such as roots or leftover concrete, and using the spade to keep the hole square all the way down. After a couple panels were placed, I checked the alignment and was horrified to realize I was going off course. I was able to correct, though it means that the fence is a bit wobbly near this end of the garden. This wouldn't have happened if I had taken the string as a literal guideline rather than a mere suggestion. Anyway, rinse and repeat about 10 plus more times. Because of the short days and since I was working on my own, I couldn't get through more than 4 panels a day at best. I suspect that if I had prepared the ground beforehand, I would have gone a lot quicker. I didn't film every panel going in because I needed to get going and filming was slowing me down. I tried to prepare a few post holes ahead of time, which I think did help, but if I were to do it again, I would do the whole prep stage first. Arriving at the last panel, I had a problem. This bird-planted tree was in the way, and unlike the other stumps I had removed before, this was a live tree. Sorry tree, but you'll have to go. To make up for it, I will donate £50 to Team Trees for each trees I had to pull out of the ground during this project, dead or alive. Since it's a relatively small tree, I could cut down the branches with the reciprocating saw, as well as some of the trunk, until it was small enough that I could pull it out of the jack, though I seem to have forgotten to film that. This time, I made sure to cut the roots first, so removing the tree wasn't too difficult. All that was left was cementing the last post. Because it was joining the other fence, I had to enlist the help of the neighbor to make sure the concrete was evenly distributed around the post. For historical reasons, the vine-covered fence belongs to my neighbor, even though I'm responsible for this fence. I will eventually continue my fence line all the way to the house, but for now I'm just placing this plank to close the gap. All that is left now are the finishing touches. First, I should screw the panels to the posts. Considering the fence managed to survive storms Kira and Dennis without being secured, I would say this is definitely an optional step, but I'll do it anyway. You'll notice that the gravel boards look like they are below the ground. This is because the street is going down, so the gardens are stepped, and mine is a bit higher than my neighbor's. It made sense to place the fence at the lower level though. In order to save some time when placing the panels, I didn't try to keep them flush with the posts. As long as they were lower than the posts, I could always raise them to the correct height when fixing them and backfill any gap left in the process. Again, this wouldn't have been necessary had I leveled the whole boundary first, but hey. Finally, it's time to put the capping rails on. These are optional extras, but I thought they would make the fence look nicer. You can buy caps for the fence post or capping rails, but don't do both as the capping rails are meant to overlap the posts. This wasn't clear on the website, so I bought both, and by the time I got to put those on, the return period was gone. But that's okay, I'll find a use for them. The rails are simply attached using the same self-tapping screws used for the panels. And finally, this is complete. As I mentioned, I'll need to carry on with the fence all the way to the house using 6-foot panel closer to it for privacy, but that requires a significant amount of landscaping I'm not ready to tackle right now. I need to get back to take care of the projects inside the house, so that's most likely what you're going to see next time you come over to this channel. Bye!